It's like it was made for it. It's a good fit. So if you think about what we're doing here, all of this is going to the back of the bike. This is all going to get plugged in right here, basically, because that's what it's for. And then these are going to get plugged in on this side, and all of this gets cut off, gone. So our relays, our brake, our relays, our fuses, all of that stuff is in here, plus more. So there's enough wire here to twist this around and plug it in. We cut the tips off, put on our little ferrules, and tick, 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 and we're done. And somebody's gonna ask, so I'll show you, why didn't you put it under the seat? Where am I gonna put it? This is all plastic. I mean, you could mount it to the plastic, but I don't have the plastic under the seat, and you know, this gets wet. But to me, it makes sense because this is where all the wires are at. So it's a shorter run from here to here than having to run wires all the way back to there and then split them up and run them back up to wherever they're going. So I can reutilize all of the factory wiring, and then there's less wiring is the way I look at it, because I can take this and plug it in right there and plug this in right here, and everything's shorter. And you know, to me it just makes a little bit more sense. So I have power and I have a ground from battery. So the unit is grounded to the frame and a unit is grounded to the battery, and that's what we want. So working on the lock side of the M unit. So power comes into the switch, the key switch, from the red wire. Power goes into the switch, and then when you turn the switch on, power comes out of this green with a black stripe. But when you use on the connector side, it's red in, red and white out. So we're going to run power from the unit straight to this red wire from the battery side. And then we're going to take this one and run it to the lock tab over here. So what'll happen is when we turn the key on, it'll turn over here and tell the unit to turn on so that it knows to go. So stator wire goes here and plugs into ignition on switch. Why? 12 volts. So it'll get the full charge from the stator, from the regulator rectifier, to keep the battery going. Now then, when I turn this on, I have power here now. And so my little doodad's lit up here, and then my ignition and my auxiliary are lit up. So we need to do ignition. There's a whole lot of variables for the Motogadget unit. Push button, all of that other kind of stuff. We're using factory switches. So what we want is power to the ignition system controlled by our switch here. Off, run, off. At least that's the way I want it. And that's the way it was before, right? So you had this wire, which is brown because it goes to ignition, and then these wires, which one of them's the off switch, the run switch, and the other one's the start switch. So what we want is we're going to take power out of the M unit. It's going to flow up to the switch, and then it's going to go back. I'm confusing myself. Oh, yeah. So it's going to flow out of the output side into the switch. So then this lead will be coming from the output side. This lead will be hot. And so then the hot wire from the switch is going to run over here to our brown wire and turn our ignition on. So when we flip it, it'll turn off. It's not open. Then we close the switch, and then it'll send power to ignition to turn on the coils and make them go boom. The fireboxes. So if we take our handy dandy multi-tester to test it, there's 3 wires on here. Let's just say there's 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top. So if we go over here like this and put a continuity tester on it, if I had alligator clips, it'd be easier, I know. So it's not those 2. So if we take it to the top, it's these 2. Right? So one of these is power in and one of them is power out, so to speak. This other one is our start button. So if I connect to that and hit start button, I got juice. Jab's on, right? So if I connect to the other one and connect to the start button and hit it, I got juice. If I turn it off, I still got juice. If I connect, I'm confusing myself again. I'm fixing to depin these, so stand by. The thing I want is, I want to be able to turn the bike on, have the switch off, and hit the start button anyway, and send power to the starter to spin the motor. Why? So I can prime the system with oil without it firing off. And there's a way in here to do that. It's just how you run the wires. And I had it figured out, and then I turned the camera on and I blew it. So this is going to be the lead to my brown wire, because it only gets power when the switch is on. So red and white is power. Red and white is power out. Remember that. Red and white, power out. Red and white is power out. Red and white goes to brown, which is okay. Red and white is power out, which is brown. It's not hard. None of this is hard. Let me take this out real fast, and we'll check it again. Red and white goes to brown. Blue and red goes to starter. So that's the yellow and red wire. And I'm just clipping it because I'm not using it again. So this will go to our start function in on our unit. Now find it. So it's right after lock. So this, I'm going to cross it over, under, around that, and plug it into lock. And there's a little doodad on there. So starter is done. Well, starter in. Starter out is red and blue. This was fuel pump. Yeah, red and blue right here. There's the battery I misplaced. This camera does not cooperate all the time. And I'll show you more later. So that thing I was doing where I routed power from the unit out through the switch, back down and into the brown wire, go into the coils, resulted in 12 volts of power to the coils. When the switch is on, turn it off, no power. So that works. And then this itty bitty tiny blue and red wire is your starter solenoid switch button. And I'm not getting anything from that. I'm losing it, man. But I'm here for you. So I ran the, whoa, don't lose that. I need that. I ran the ignition switch through here, right? Because there's two wires. There's a green and this red and white. Green and black and red and white. And then for starter, what it is the starter button takes power from the green button and sends it to the yellow and red. But that's not the way this thing works. Sorry. This thing wants a ground signal to activate the unit on the start. So like a regular old push button where you push the button and it grounds out against the frame and then the wire's connected. I'll show you. I'll demonstrate. I'm not making this up. So I have the starter connected to the starter pin, and then this is just a jumper. So if I plug jumper in to the start button or the start input, here it is. If I come over here and touch it to my ground, turn the key on, it wants to start. But what happens is with the way I had it configured, or the way this switch is configured, when you hit this button, you're making a connection between yellow and red and green. So I got a workaround, and I've been working on this particular spot, this switch, for 4 hours. I took everything off again and put it back on again, but that's just me. I put the screw back in so I don't lose it. So what I'm gonna do is, and this seems a bit excessive, but I think it's what we're gonna do. It's the only way I can figure it. Is I'm gonna cut this green and black jumper from here, and then I'm gonna strip all this off, of course. I said something wrong and the camera turned off. And then I'm going to take this green wire that I'm going to cut and I'm going to run it to ground. That way when I push this button, it activates ground and it's going to start this motorcycle. You're going to see it happen. It's because I want to use the factory switch. I just want to. It's too late to go back. There's shit all over the place. I can't go back. I'd have to buy a whole new wiring harness. I spent a lot of money on this stuff, and by God, I'm going to use it. So, if I cut this, I might be able to snake another wire up in there. And, you know, I don't really need this because I have more. So it'll be a ground kill switch, basically, but that's going to be a ground start switch. Let me do that, and then I'll come back, and hopefully I did it right. Okay, I moved you because you've been in my way this entire time. So what I did is, this is my starter lead, start button. This is my start button ground. So now the start button is just a ground switch. And then these two is the pathway for the kill switch. So think of the kill switch as a loop. This turns it off, this turns it on. And then because I had it, I pulled off the old factory stuff and I put on the stuff I got from Revival Cycles out of their kit. It's a little bit nicer because it's new. So on our output side, we'll go into number 4, and I keep setting my tools down, but not in the same place. I put the ferrule on this one, and it helps. You're dealing with thin wire, it's kind of hard to get it into the little slot. What you do is, I'm gonna have to move. Sorry, I can't do it backwards, but I can do it this way. I'll try to stay out of the way. So what you do is you grab your little wire doojab. First, let me take this one out. I'll show you. So you just push this little pin down a little bit. And well, it's this little orange thing. Push it in, and then your wire will pop out. So this has been my jumper lead for the past several hours while I was trying to figure out how to make this start button work. And so I think I finally have. Before I hook this up, let me strip this and put a splicer on there and strip this and put a ring terminal on it. It's just one of those, it's one of those things when it starts to snowball and you can't figure out why. And then you start losing your mind a little bit because you're like, hey, I watched this kid on the internet do it real fast. For me, black is ground. And this is a ground. Why do I give it the double hand squeeze? I don't know. That's just something I do. If I had one that was hydraulic, I'd squish that sucker. I know. Well, if you really cared, you'd be over here soldering them all. I don't want to solder them all. Maybe on the second go round, after I get this all done, then maybe I'll do that. Not kidding either, I probably will. Okay, so I need this brown wire. Brown wire goes to coils, ignition. I was just about to say this was a bad idea. Sorry, I lost hope there for a minute. Technically, we haven't even got to the hard part yet. The hard part is the lights. These are for something totally different. Try not to get too confused. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking this yellow and red and maybe orange, and then you take it here. Sorry, I gotta get in the way. Push this in, clamp it down. All right, so that one's good. And then this is nothing. Where is it? This. Sorry. Bend these out of the way. Stop. God bless them. The skinny green and black is my ignition lead. So it's going to go up here in the 4th hole. Just like that. Power comes out of here, number 4, runs through this green and black, up to the switch. Up to the switch. And then back through the switch to this pink and brown wire. I really want that on the other side of that thing, but I'll do that in a minute. And then my start button is just a ground. So it's open. And I'm going to hook this ground up to this ground lug, because I made it short like that. 6mm. I'll put on volts. You can kind of see that. Now you can really see it. Okay, so when I turn the key on, my phone's going to talk because I hooked up the Bluetooth app. So I got juice, right? So if I come over here and touch the coil, I got 11 volts, 1127 and 1094 because it's dropping fast because of all this screwballs in this. So I'm going to keep that on there. It's in the run, and when I turn it to off, it goes to 0. So ignition's dead. Turn it on, and we're good, right? Now, if I hit this start button, it's going to turn over, and since the ignition's on, it might start. Kill it, right? Okay. So the start button was the thing that was giving me the fits. I couldn't get it to start. Why? Because the start had 12 volts. So it was getting 12 volts from this green wire. It was 0 voltage when it was out. When you pressed it, it got 12 volts. So this machine is not looking for voltage, it's looking for a ground. So you had to flip it. So that's why I went over there and took it apart and soldered in a wire. And now we're good. I'll try to explain that better earlier in the video. You won't, well, you'll see. Okay, so step 1 and 2 is done. I could probably even, let me do something. Chuck this to battery. I don't have a fuel pump hooked up yet, but that's not that big a deal. I'm on 11 volts. If I shove this in here, it's going to read, turn this on, turn this on. So that means that our stator is pushing power to the regulator rectifier, and it's going to the battery and it's charging it up because the voltage was climbing when we rev it up. So we have voltage. So I'm totally stoked now instead of being totally depressed. This thing is going to have to come out a little bit and give me some slack, but I'll zip tie that up right here and I'll be fine. I could even do it right now. That's a relief, bros. These things are leftovers from the ignition switch. We only needed 2 of them. And what we can do is we can plug one of these into the auxiliary over here and then plug the other one in over here and use it for like lights when you turn the bike on. But there's also a lights section, so I don't know what we're gonna do with these yet. They may just get cut off.